his debut book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, Yuval Noah Harari elegantly encapsulates the rise of Homo sapiens and their incredible transformation from an insignificant ape with no ecological impact whatsoever into ultimately becoming someone who dominates the planet today. The story of Homo sapiens begins in East Africa about 200,000 years ago. In fact, Homo sapiens are not the only human species to walk the planet Earth, but the only surviving one. And it has been so for the last 13,000 years. Humans evolved in Africa around 2.5 million years ago. Back then, none of our human ancestors would have an inkling that their descendant would one day transcend the boundaries of our planet, set his foot on the moon, split the atom, sequence the human genome, and all the while getting busy in bending nature to his will, and as an offshoot, driving other species to extinction. Harari argues that the history of Homo sapiens kick-started about 70,000 years ago, when the emergence of fictive language opened the doors for cognitive revolution. In fact, we owe a lot to cognitive revolution for our apex position in the food chain. This is the phase in our history that catapulted humans, the mediocre foragers who rarely hunted big game and often fed on gathering plants, to the top of the food chain. And with agricultural revolution, which occurred around 12,000 years ago, sapiens domesticated plants and animals, started establishing permanent settlements. Agricultural revolution empowered humankind to feed many. Consequently, hunger is not as much a mortal threat as it was earlier. And the last piece in our story is scientific revolution, which began around 500 years ago. That's when humankind admitted its ignorance and began to acquire unprecedented power. But before we examine each of these three revolutions in detail, let's skim through the timeline of history, starting with the beginning of time itself, the Big Bang. Matter and energy appeared about 13.7 billion years ago, and that's the beginning of physics. Shortly after the Big Bang, atoms and molecules emerged and began to interact manifoldly, hence the beginning of chemistry. The solar system, and obviously planet Earth, formed around 4.5 billion years ago. 3.8 billion years ago, right conditions and suitable chemistry on planet Earth enabled the emergence of earlier life forms. That's the birth of biology for you. Since then, life continued to evolve, gradually into more complex forms, despite the fact that Earth suffered 5 major mass extinctions till date. And some biologists even believe we are living through the 6th one. Thanks to the resilience of nature, life never ceased to exist in toto. But that's the story of evolution, which deserves another dedicated video essay. Now let's cut to the chase to 6 million years ago. That's when humans shared last common ancestor with chimpanzees. Since then, chimps and our human ancestors moved along separate evolutionary paths. Around the same time, about 6 to 7 million years ago, climate in East Africa gradually morphed from thick, dense woodland forest into vast expanse of grasslands. Accident is the building block of evolution. Of course it is. The story of life on Earth is largely shaped by accidents, say that the asteroid impact, volcanic eruptions, or climate change. The unprecedented climate change in Africa exposed our ancestors to open savannas and nudged them to divorce from their long-held tree-dwelling habitats and move on to the vast grasslands, searching for food. And in the process, they taught themselves to walk upright on 2 feet and eventually run. Bipedalism enabled them to stand.